Well, you join us here today at the fantastic Barston Lakes complex. It's one of my favourites, I will admit it. We're just moving into the colder months of the year now, so I brought you along here today. We're going to show you about my approach where we are tackling venues like this. I'll show you the kit that I'm going to use. And we're just going to go through the approach where we're just kind of fishing for bites. We know this time of year we might be tackling silverfish, but we also know that certainly on days like today when it's a little bit milder, then you never really know what you're going to hook. So we're going to take you through the kit, through the baits, through the approach, and hopefully we're going to catch a few fish. I'm a massive believer in keeping bait trays and your bait selections really simple, and that is even more so in winter. So the baits that I'm going to be using today are ones that are more reflective of winter fishing. You know, we're going to be fishing with some maggots, some pinkies, and it's just kind of keeping your options really down to a minimum, because if fish are going to be in your peg, you want to make sure that they are feeding on the bait that you've potentially got on the hook. So that is obviously reflected in my bait tray. I've got dead red maggots. They're a fantastic bait. We use them on a wide variety of venues now. I'm going to be feeding these on 2 different lines, which I'll talk you through in a little while. I'm going to be feeding different lines differently, but they should probably be the main bait, certainly the best hook bait for today anyway. So I've got some dead reds, I've got some fluorescent pinkies, a fantastic winter bait. These are live ones, they're just coming round now, they've been bagged up, but they're a fantastic winter bait. Obviously they're live, so they're going to be riddling, and that can just get you extra bites during the winter. And as you can see, they're very visually bright as well. The water here is quite coloured, and just the actual colour of that can get you extra bites. One thing that I never did up until about a year ago was to feed micro pellets when I'm fishing like this. I never used to do it because I like to keep the options really, you know, down to a minimum. But over the last 12 months or so, I've found that, you know, it can be very important to feed micro pellets now on these sorts of venues, just purely because the fish see so many of them and they get used to them, certainly the skimmers and the bream. So I've got a few micro pellets. They're the 2mm ringer pellets, but I've also got a nice dark ground bait mix here. This is the Ringers F1 Sweet. That's, as the name suggests, it's a sweet mix. It's nice and dark, as you can see, which is perfect in certainly going through the winter months. There isn't much feed in there either, and this mix will allow me to over wet it as well and use it at different consistencies. So that's the mix I'm using today. And the other addition to the bait tray, which is a bit of a late decision to be fair, and that is some chopped worm, very finely chopped worm. And that is because on certain venues, you know, at certain times of year, the fish can really cry out for this sort of bait. It can really transform your peg. So I've got some worm with me if we're going to need it. So the feeders we're going to be using today are obviously reflected in the time of year, so everything's scaled down a little bit. Now I am going to be feeding 2 lines today. I'm going to feed one quite positive at 20 metres, and on that line I'm going to be feeding it quite positive with that cage there. All right, now the expectation is I'm not going to be going on that line for at least the first hour. So I'm going to feed it nice and positive so that hopefully some fish will be settled on that when I go on that line. The other line I'm going to be fishing is going to be 35 metres. I'm going to fish 2 spots on that line, but the feeder I expect to be using on there, if the conditions stay as they are now, which is, you know, there isn't any wind, I'll be able to get away with that 20 gram cage feeder. That should be ideal, and because it's nice and light, it's got a lead on the side, the weight is on the side, it should sit nicely on the soft silty bottom that we are faced with here. However, if the wind gets up, that can change the style of the feeder. Still keep a 20 gram feeder on, but change the style so it's more of a weight forward style feeder, which will allow me to punch it out into that wind if it does get tricky. And if it gets even worse than that and I'm still struggling to get out there, then I can switch to that style feeder, which, you know, again, it just means I'm going to be able to get out to where I'm going to be fishing. So I'm going to get my 2 lines fed, and then I'm going to talk you through the rigs once we start fishing. Right, well, I'm going to be starting on the 35 metre line, so because I'm starting on that line, that is the line that I will feed first, okay? And all I'm going to put in there is a few fluoro pinkies, and a tiny sprinkling of the micro pellets and just a little pinch of chopped worm. I'm only going to put 2 feederfuls on that line, just with a small cage. And like I say, because I'm going to be going straight on this line, I don't want to put too much feeding on it, because I don't obviously want to spend ages waiting for a bite. Okay, so I'm just going to put 2 in on this, quite active, just to hopefully get 1 or 2 fish there around the feed. See, that's hit bottom already. This is a very shallow venue. Where I'm fishing there, I actually spent a few minutes with a bomb on before the start of the session, just to get a feel for what the bottom was like. There are patches of gravel on this venue, and if that is an option, I would always rather fish on gravel. And that's just through experience, that I've fished areas where it's been silty, and it's had a massive impact on the types of bites that you get. You can have lots of line bites, and the fish just don't feed properly because of the silt. So out there, I know it's a little bit firmer there. I mean, I wouldn't say there is a big patch of gravel, but it is a little bit firmer. So I'm just feeding the same again on that line. And then once these 2 feederfuls have gone in, this line is going to get 2, 3, 4 minutes time to settle. So that's emptied really nice and quickly. I'm fishing braid on this line. That is just obviously to enhance any sort of bites that we might be getting out there. And when you're emptying a feeder with braid, because there's no stretch there, it does empty a lot easier, it's a lot quicker because it's a lot sharper. All right, so what I'm going to do now is pop that rod down, and I'm going to feed my 20 metre line. Now this line I don't expect to go on for at least an hour, so I need to put enough feed in to kind of keep fish there for an hour. The last thing I want to be doing is piling loads and loads of bait in, so that if there aren't as many fish there, I don't want to be waiting ages and ages for bites. So again, I'm going to put a few pinkies, a few micros, and a pinch of chopped worm. And I'm probably going to put four cage fulls in on this line. All right, so it's a nice, you see the size of the feeder there. There's not loads of feed in there, but there's enough in there to keep it going for at least an hour. And I'm going to offset this line. So I've picked my line for the long line. I'm going to offset this to the right slightly, just so that when I'm retrieving the feeder, on the longer line, the last thing I want to be doing, certainly on a shallow venue like this when it's flat calm, is be dragging my feeder over the top of that line. You know, I'm not saying it is detrimental to the peg, but it certainly won't help fish settle there. So I'm just offsetting it, and I like to offset it to the right because I have my rod to the left. If you offset it to the right, you don't need to change the position of your feeder rest when you go on that line, because it's already at the right angle. So like I say, I'm going to put 4 of these in, not loads of bait, but like I said, just enough to keep it going for an hour, and try not to be too accurate on this line. The last thing you want to do, because you want grazing fish there, you don't want them grazing on, you know, 6 square inch. You want them grazing over about, you know, at least half a metre. And that's why I'm putting four cage fulls in of this size. I could obviously put 1 massive great big feeder in, just put 1 in, put the same quantity in, but obviously by doing that, all that means it's got to go in exactly on the same spot, but that we don't want. We want to spread the bait a little bit. So that's the 3rd one, and the last one I'm just going to put ground bait in, because as we know, fish will graze over just ground bait as well, and we don't want too much feed. If I do go on it in an hour, I want the chance of a fish finding my hook bait pretty high. Well, the rod and reel, the setup I've got for today is it's an identical setup. Okay, so on both lines I'm fishing the 3.3 metre XS Slim, and they are both coupled with the new Horizon 3000 reels. The main difference, and the only difference really, is the actual what I've actually got on the reel. So on the long line I'm fishing with braid. So on this particular one it's 0.10 submerged braid that I've got on, but I've also got, that's coupled with a 6 metre 8-pound shock leader as well. Okay, now the rig I'm going to be using on both lines is a free running rig, okay, and that is coupled with a feeder link. So I've just got a nice simple feeder link, free running, and that is just stopped with a feeder bead, just a single one. We're only casting 20 gram, so that is easily strong enough to withstand the cast on that, and it's really nice and light as well, which I think really helps with bite detection. Below that I've then got about 4" of twizzled, well, it's a twizzled boom really, it's just the same shot leader material twizzled up, and then I've got a hook length which is about 30 centimeters long, 0.12 diameter to a size 16 barbless hook, and that's, like I say, I'm kicking off with a 30 centimeter hook length, and I'll just, you know, shorten that or lengthen that accordingly. But it's a free running rig. I'm using a free running rig on the other line as well, and I'll be fishing the short line slightly different from the way that I'll be fishing this, but I can talk you through that whilst we're fishing. Right, for hook bait I'm going to be kicking off with just a single dead red. I mean, this kind of session you're just kind of getting a feel for what's out there. We might be catching lots of small fish. There have been lots of small fish caught here recently, but some of them are too small. You know, you really want to be casting a stamper fish, but we don't know what to expect till we start fishing. So I'm going to be kicking off with a single dead red on the hook, and just 3 or 4 micro pellets, and just probably half a dozen pinkies. And like I say, if we're not catching, if we're not getting any bites, then obviously I can simply just cut back on the feed on future casts and just feel our way into the session. You don't want to go blowing your session straight away by putting too much bait in. So I'm kicking off on the 35 metre line, single dead red, and hopefully we'll get some indications quite quickly. Well, that's really been interesting. You know, we got a few indications early on, and it seemed quite evident that there were a few fish there. A lot of hand-sized skimmers, which is interesting. Good to see, certainly for the fishery. Had a few indications, and it just really wasn't working very well, even though I knew fish were there. I've actually cut back on the feed, and so I literally had about 3 or 4 casts with just ground bait in the feeder, and it was unreal. Just got a quick run of fish then, you know, as though you know, the fish come to the pop of the feeder, to the ground bait, and then obviously with the single maggot hook bait I've been picking off fish like that. So it's just showing signs it's slowing down a little bit, but I'm dying to try that short line. It's been an hour now since we fed it, so I'm going to pick the other rod up and have a look on that line and just see some fish have settled on it. Right, the setup on this shorter line is very, very similar to the other one. It's a free running rig again with a feeder link on, 20 gram feeder on, nice and simple, 30 centimetre hook length again, but the only difference here is I'm fishing a slightly larger hook. So this is a size 14, the other one was a 16, and that's because I just want to try and fish with a slightly bigger bait. The way that I fed this line is, obviously it's been an hour now since I fed this line, and so this line I'm hoping that some fish are actually settled on that feed. So with that in mind, I'm hoping that there are going to be some fish milling about on the feed, and the last thing I really want to be doing is picking up too early and disturbing any fish like that that might already be there. So with that in mind, I'm going to be using the butt rest with the rod, so I'm not going to be having the rod on the knee, and I'm going to be slack lining, because I want to make sure that when I get the bite, I want to make sure that that fish is on before I pick up. And with a free running rig, it's great to do that, because obviously the line can run through the rig itself. I can slack line, and obviously I can pick up hopefully when I'm sure the fish is on, because the last thing you want to be doing is pricking fish, especially if there are bream or skimmers there. You don't want to be pulling your rig into them, because obviously that'll upset them and unsettle them. So I'm just kicking off. I've got 2 big dead red maggots on, just to get a feeling for what's there. I put quite a bit of bait in the feeder, and that's because if I catch a fish, I obviously want to put some feed there. But if I don't catch on this line, I'll probably give it 2 or 3 casts just to see if there's anything there, and if not, I can always go back onto my other line, but this means I'll prime this line again with some feed so I can leave it a little bit longer. So we'll just plot that in at 20 metres. That's at the bottom. What I'm going to do now is put the rod down and just slack line. Okay, so I'm going to leave the line will just take a few seconds to sink, and then I'm going to slack line, so when I get a bite, hopefully I can decide to pick up when I'm pretty sure that the fish is on. Well, there we go. It's only a small fish for a positive bite. It's just one of them small skimmers again, but it's a good sign that there might be one or two fish there settled. Little skimmer, beautiful little fish, stunning. It's just a sign that there's one or two fish there, hopefully. And obviously sometimes with a bigger hook bait like this, it can really reflect that in the type of bite that you get. Sometimes with a bigger, more positive bait, you get a much better bite. So I'm just going to feed again a few micros, not many, a few pinkies and a pinch of chopped worm. And now over the next couple of casts now, it will really let us know whether there are fish there in numbers and what sort of stamp they are. Well, that's a better fish. They're the ones that we're after now. Been catching some small fish, double maggot. There's been lots of small fish there around obviously this line that I've fed for a while. But just to try and be a bit more selective, I wanted to, they look like line bites as though they were better fish milling about. So I've just switched to worm. As you know, we've been feeding worm anyway. And I just put a piece of worm on about 2 inch long, and that has been the reward. It's been in about 2 or 3 minutes, that's all. Had to be nice and patient. It was a nice pull round. And obviously I didn't want to pick up until we thought the fish was on, but there we go. Much better stamp. They're the fish that, you know, they can really make a difference on venues like this, and you're still able to hook them and land them on nice light tattle as well. So hopefully some of those have rocked up on that short line, and we're going to have a good finish to the session. Well, that's a lovely fish to finish on. It's been very evident that there's been a big difference in the two lines that we've fished today, and that's why it's very important, certainly at this time of year, to cover your options by covering different areas of the swim. The longer line we fished a little bit more negative, and funnily enough that line got better when we cut the feed out and just used ground bait. However, this inside line, the 20 metre line, has been producing a much better stamp of fish. We've had a few this size, and we've had some bigger than that as well today, and one chunky F1, but it's definitely been evident that these bigger fish have been on this shorter line at 20 metres. I've had to feed pinkies, and I've fed some micro pellets as well, but without shadow of a doubt, a piece of worm about 2 inch long has been best for these fish. I had to wait a little bit longer for bites, but that's been, you know, definitely the best way of catching these better stamped fish. And as we all know, in matches, these fish are very, very important, and you know, just by putting that line in that's been quite positive short, that's really it's been the area to catch these fish. So the rigs and everything have worked brilliantly today. You know, we did get a few indications early on, but just by slacklining it, I fished a mono line, 6 pound reel line on this short line, and that's been great for cushioning these better fish as they've been nodding when I've hooked them on this relatively light tattle. That's why the mono comes into play there. You've just got a bit of a cushion there, so it's worked really, really well. So it's going to be interesting to see the net of fish. So I'm just going to put this rod away now and let's have a look at what we've caught. Well, it's turned out into a really good session. A little bit of a slow start, but once we made a few tweaks, we managed to get some fish in the net, and then obviously we had a great finish on that short line. What we've really enjoyed this insight into how we fish waters at this time of year, where we're just fishing for bites really. 20 odd pound of fish there, a lonely F1, but plenty of skimmers and bream in there. It's been a fantastic session. Just get these popped back now, and hopefully you've enjoyed this little bit of an insight into how we can fish commercials going into the colder months, where we're just fishing for bites, and how a nice balanced approach can certainly still be a match winner. Thanks for watching.